Hey, ladies, welcome to another episode of the Revitalized Womanhood podcast. And I am so excited for our guest today, Becca Post. She and I have been talk about mom life meets trying to run a business, trying to build a brand, trying to do all the things, right? We've canceled it. I almost canceled again last night, fourth time. And I'm like, no, we've got to do it. I told my husband, I'm like, babe, this episode has to happen. I realize it's on our anniversary trip. It has to happen. I will not cancel on this woman again. And I told him that 2 weeks ago. And so he's like, that's fine. He's literally down on his own call right now, right? And he's like, that's fine. And so I tell him as we're walking in last night, I'm like, okay, just remember, I've got this episode tomorrow. And he throws a little mini man tantrum. And I'm like, okay. So thank you, Becca Post. Thank you so much for making this happen with me and rearranging and understanding that life happens. It's just the shiz we're in and it happens. Welcome to Revitalize Womanhood. Will you please let me stop talking and introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yeah, I would love to. And I think I've become more empathetic on nothing working out and timing being really hard as I became a parent. I think before I was so rigid about it. And now I'm like, yeah, okay, that thing I agreed to is not happening today. Now we'll try again.
It's like a club we're all in. We all understand.
Yeah. So I am a licensed clinical social worker and a self-development coach. I own a mental health therapy practice in Salt Lake City, Utah. I have a team of 6 therapists, all women now. And our model of therapy that we work from is very much value-based, having the therapist understand their values about healing and how they work, and really educating people that the mental health world is changing and we need different forms of support when we need it. So our practice is called forward healing therapy and after therapy. And what happens is you meet with us for therapy, right? We process all the stuff, we work through it, and then we hopefully transition you into our after therapy coaching program, which is just a place for you once you're not in the mental health and trying to work through the trauma and the symptoms aren't impacting your life. A lot of the times people just want a place to land, once a month, a couple times, maybe just for 3 months, and someplace they can come back to. And that is what we're focusing on building right now is our after therapy coaching program.
I love it so much. I was just saying, this is so aligned with what we do here in the Revitalized Sisterhood, our private community as well. And I say that too is coaching is not counseling. If you are at that level, what's his name's pyramid, it's if you need counseling, you need counseling. There's no amount of coaching that's going to help you until you get that work done, until you get those foundational, fundamental issues handled, right? So I want to ask, how does community, so ours is community, so it offers accountability and support, how and like-minded women all working to be better for themselves, right? Not for each other, but to be better for themselves. How does that get incorporated into your program?
I think this is a big thing where mental health is changing, right? I think I always have to feel out how to say this. For so
Just say it.
long, part of what the boundary, the difficulty in therapy is being able to be all my clients should be friends, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many of my clients I sit in a room with as a therapist, and I was like, wow, I have the perfect person for you to talk to this about. That's not me on a weekly
Yeah.
basis that you could hang out with and actually go
It's
skiing
like
or
a
do these other
sponsor
things
from
with.
AA,
Yeah, that I can
but
I
for
cannot
therapy.
introduce you to.
Right.
I cannot do this. And so a big thing what I learned during COVID was that I had clients moving out of state. I had a lot of things happening and I was like, how do I do something different? And coaching allowed me to step into this place of oh, I can put people in a room and not have the barrier of being you can't talk about this, or you can't exchange phone numbers, or you can't connect on social media. I can put you in a place where you can actually connect. And so a lot of what we're doing now and our focus for 2025 is really community building through our after therapy program, which is hey, you're in therapy. Hey, all these other people are in therapy too. You're complaining that your friends and your family aren't changing and you want to be around more people that are. Here you go.
Absolutely. I totally get that. That's true. You have been hindered by this anonymity, this, doctor confidentiality. And actually, it's really interesting because, as in my coaching community, I talk about this a lot. I talk about this whole when you are with me, I am a vault. But they also have not only the whole community that once they are comfortable trusting and opening up to, I mean, the whole community is a vault. But once they are to the point, they not only have the whole community, but they have little tiny, they're called squads, little teams, where those squads meet once a week and they are like a girl gang. They are share it all, tear it down, whatever. So it's absolutely we were created to thrive in community. We were not created to do this alone. And I'm so grateful for COVID for that because I think it did almost springboard this new, I need people. Like I've been alone too much and now I need people, right?
Yeah.
That's super
Really,
cool.
I think really being able to see that people also aren't coming to therapy anymore for the most part. A majority of people, because it's become so to go to therapy, right? Like it's talked about on the internet, it's talked about on social media, it's talked about all on all these things. Therapy is no longer like, I'm coming to fix this thing and I want it. People want long term support. And our system isn't designed for that.
Well, and it's not even that, but I think there's a faux pas behind it, this
So, yeah.
misconception that therapy is for someone that's broken. And no one wants
Hmm.
to admit they're broken. I mean, the really broken people, they need that. But people like you and I see, which I'm going to jump into this next question because you are in northern Utah, I'm in southern Utah. And I love that you've come from New Jersey because, like I said, you have this completely different perspective on life. And now you've been thrown into the beehive. Oh, welcome. Welcome to the beehive. So I think that you're the perfect person to ask this question to because you are an expert. I can have my opinions because I'm an expert in living it. But what do you think women, not in therapy, but women in after therapy or in communities like mine, what I'm trying to develop, what do you think the biggest struggles are for these women?
Authentic connection is definitely a big one where they don't have to feel performative. Especially in Utah, I think that's like a big thing that I work a lot on. Wanting to not do it all, but wanting more than they thought or taught that they could have. And the other big thing I see is this belief of like challenged worth that is like comes in as a therapy like issue, but really feeds into these other two areas, right? Which is I want authentic connection because I want to build relationships where I don't have to feel like I perform, but also I want more than what I saw the people in my life have. And I don't know how to get there or get that.
Oh my
And so,
gosh,
how do I
you
find a space where that is
nailed
an
it.
option
You
and
nailed it.
acceptable?
Which is why these online and them finding you, yours may not be online, but you have an entire state that they can come to
Hmm.
from. So you're not likely to be sitting next to your sister-in-law. You're not likely to be
Hmm.
sitting next to the primary president. You're not likely to, you know what I mean? So you have that bit of anonymity. And I've said that so many times. The beauty of these online spaces or spaces like that is you you may have a great relationship with your sister-in-law or your sister or your mother or your mother-in-law or whatever. You have this great relationship with these women in your life, but you don't need them to know every little thing about what's going on in your private life because they see your husband daily. They see your kids daily. They have this connection to you where they will be biased. They have a natural bias. And that's scary. That's embarrassing. That's all of the stigmas, right? That we don't want people to know these things about us, but yet we need help with them. So finding these other women who are across state lines, across countries, that are all coming together saying, hi, I know what you're talking
Me
about.
too.
is like, oh, so nice.
I also think even in Utah, though, specifically, right? Because I didn't grow up here, but I have lived here now for, oh my God, 10 years. 10 years. But it's even cross county. Like it's even like so small that it's the idea that you can like meet people who live like actually 30 minutes from you who have an entirely different perspective of the world. Kind of wild, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. So I want to dive into how, because this is very much, my word of the year this year was results. I am very much, and next year it's just going to get worse. We are diving into allowing room for change this month, our monthly topic, and our book going along with it is Brianna Wiest, Pivot Year. So we've already done The Mountain Is You, crushed that. Like, and so pivot year, and it is my whole vibe for next year is I hope you change your life this year. And it's not, I love how Brianna even explains it's not in this materialistic way. It's in this deep dreamer, this parallel life that you're living. Why are you not connecting to this parallel life of dreams and values and worth and self-love? It's like it's there, it's living alongside you, but you're not connecting to it. Why? So let's talk about these women and let's talk about these three things you said because I think you nailed it and it's connection and being able to not wrap their worth, their value up in constantly saying yes, people pleasing, performative. I love that you're using that performative because it is performative. I'm seeing a divorce happening right now that's very close to me and it's breaking my heart. And I nailed it when I said she feels like she has had to be this person for the past 20 years, but nobody's told her she has to be this person. She's taken this on. She's assumed this role like we do, and she feels like she has to live up to this standard, live up to this expectation. And it's like, no, you've been putting this on yourself. So first of all, take accountability for that. So help me if I'm talking to this person, how do we first say, you have to take ownership for this. Nobody else forced this onto you. Now we can move on to healing it.
The way that I look at this through my lens, which is very much through the forward model of change I've built, is that in order to really be able to be accountable for what you've done in the dynamic, is that you have to be willing to go backwards and say, where did I even learn that this was an option? Like, where did I learn that I had to show up this way? Why did I learn that? How did I learn that? Like, even if it was the most subtle ways that you watched on TV or you saw in church or you watched your mom do. Like, I just had a client recently where she's like, "My family was so great. I grew up, like, in such a loving family. They were so welcoming to me." And I was like, "Cool, but, like, why did you learn that you had to prove yourself if you grew up in, like, a really welcoming and loving family?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Somewhere along the way, you witnessed a story that you ingrained as, like, part of who you had to be. And where did that come from?" And honestly, she realized, "Oh, I watched my mom be a stay-at-home mom. And I never saw her do anything that she wanted to do by herself." And, like, it was just, like, that small connection, right, where you allow yourself to travel all the way back to the root to develop the awareness and the understanding for how you got here to then be able to step into and be like, "Okay, well, this is a pattern that showed up because of it. My people pleasing, my desire to look a certain way, my eating disorder, my anxiety all came out of this narrative that I created early on in my life." Because we do that, right? Like, I think a lot of the research says a majority of our limiting beliefs show up before we're 3. Joey's as a toddler mom, I'm always like, "Oh, how do
Wow.
I prevent this?" Yeah.
Wow.
And your attachment style cements by 18 months.
That's
Like,
insane. Don't tell me
Yeah,
that.
so
That makes me sad because now I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old that
yeah.
I've already screwed up completely.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, a game over. I mean, I have a 2-year-old, and every time I watch him, I'm like, "Do you have anxious attachment now? Did I, like, ruin you?" Every time he goes through a growth spurt. But the reality is that so much of it is that we unconsciously took these narratives on. Like, a really good example, not necessarily the divorce one that you have, but I think, like, for her, it really comes back to, like, where did I believe I had to show up this way? But, like, I grew up with the belief that moms don't wear bikinis, and, like, I know this is gonna be, like, a Utah-based podcast, which is, like, also a whole thing, but, like, my mom had so much body shame about who she was that she had very rigid rules around what motherhood and mothers should wear. So when I became a mom, and I like to be, I mean, you can't see my homie, but I don't have the body to like really wear a one piece. Like I have really kind of long legs and like a short torso. It doesn't work, right? And so when became a mom, I literally was like, oh, I can't wear my like my two-piece bathing suits anymore. And my husband was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, like I can't. Like I'm a mom now. And he was like, how many of your mom friends wear two-piece bathing suits? And I was like, all of. And he was like, "What? Like, where is this coming from?" And I realized, like, I was like, "Okay, if I track all the way backwards, when did I realize I shouldn't do that?" And I was like, "Oh, I never saw my mom do this. Like, I never saw these things, what I saw, and I then created a narrative about, right?" That's what we do is we see things growing up and we create narratives about them. And then we try to live by them without ever asking, does this align with what I want to do? Does this align with how I feel or what I believe or what works in my body? And
Well, let's stop
we don't
there
get that time.
because I think the first problem is nobody's asking, "What do
Oh,
I want? How
you
do
want
I
someone to
want to
ask.
live?" Yeah, it's nobody's asking. Nobody's asking themselves because nobody's the first time someone asked me this, and this I was brought to my attention that my husband was like, "Oh, that's so lucky you had a husband that did this for you," which is
Mhm,
obviously a cry for toxic relationship help. But I said it was when I was 20, when was 2010, 11, the recession hit, right? And my
mhm.
husband said, we'd lost everything and we were just down and out as it can get. And he said, "What do you want for the rest of our life?
Mhm.
What do you expect? Do you want to keep living the way we were living, keeping up with the Joneses? Like, is that what you want? That's fine, but we need to get on the same page here because now we're
Yeah.
rebuilding. What do
Mhm.
you want?" And I was like, "To be a mom and have a house." That's all I've been shown. That's all I know. And
Yeah.
I love it. That's what I want. It is what I want. But he said, "But what if, let me just throw this out here. Would you want to travel the world?" And I'm like, "That's an
Mhm.
option. Yeah, let's
Mhm.
do that." And
Yeah.
it was in that moment that I was like, wait a minute. Someone actually asked me what I want to do because up until this point, because I had been married right out of, well, it wasn't right out of high school, but to my high school sweetheart. And it was exampled to me in that relationship that I had to cook, clean, make babies, keep the house comfortable, support him in everything he did. Also, I have to go get a job that has insurance because he's not going to be providing that and he has an issue and he needs insurance. So I have to go to school and have a good job, all while doing these things and making five-course dinners. And I cracked. Luckily, in the first 7 months of that marriage, I was like, "I don't like this. I'm out," right? So a year later, I was out, luckily. But with my husband now, that was the first time that anybody ever was like, "We can think bigger. We can dream
Mhm.
bigger. This world is proof of all of these magical things that other people have done to dream bigger," right? So
Yeah.
why how do we get these women to understand you need to start by asking yourself?
I think the biggest thing is the trust that it's okay to ask myself, and it's also okay to want someone else to ask you, right? Like, it's okay to, like, wanna hire the therapist that you can, like, talk about your marriage with so that you can ask that question, and maybe they'll ask that question, but you don't have to take action immediately. I think that's where we get really caught up in this question, is, like, when someone says, like, "What do you want?" then we're
would think
immediately
it
our
has to
brains go
happen
to,
immediately.
it has to happen immediately. And what I want to offer women is like when you ask that question, you can say, what do I want? And then you can say, what's working now that's within that and what's not working now that's within that, and then work towards it because you can't make all those changes at once. Like a client recently reminded me that we've been working together for years, so it's got to be like 5 years ago now. That when I first met her, I asked why she was in the Mormon church, and like I was a naive, like new therapist, kind of didn't know that that was like maybe not a question you should ask people in Utah, and but what she told me was what she told me now. It's 5 years later. She's left. It's been a couple of years. She's like done a whole bunch of work. She was like, if you hadn't asked me why, I never would have even contemplated it. Right. Like, so like that's an example of the therapist planting the seed. I never brought it up again. Like I supported her fully and like all of the things that she did. But it was the fact that I even asked why and she couldn't come up with an answer for herself. What the answer
It was
was for everyone
generational
else.
for that. It was, yeah, it's generational.
Yeah. She's like, this is what we do. Right.
That's
And so 5 years. That's what I wanna give the example of, right? Is like the seed gets
right.
planted, you ask the question, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're immediately uprooting your entire life and
Right.
reevaluating everything and leaving your marriage and like going to get a new career and traveling the world. It's like really figuring out, okay, this is what I want. I want a career. I want a house. I want these things. Okay, what are the values behind though? Because the thing isn't actually what you want. It's what the thing is what the value is,
Right.
right? A
The feeling
house
it's going to give you.
A house, people, when they think of like, I want a house, it's like, okay, I want stability. I want a foundation. I want a place to call my own. I want these things. And it's like, okay, but does it have to be a house? Then you can explore, right? Then you can say, I want a community. Okay, but like, do you want a community where you're in a neighborhood or do you want a community where you're in an apartment? And they get to be different once you identify the want. Then you work backwards and say, but what is the value behind the want?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. You're my new favorite person. I'm so why have we waited so long? Why have we had so much life happen between us? Jim Carrey says, I wish if I had a wish, I wish for every person in the world to get what they dream about, what they wish for,
Mhm.
right? Because he said once you get it, you realize, oh, that wasn't
If I
that
want it.
wasn't exactly what I wanted. You're
Mhm.
wishing and you're wishing and you're hoping. So at least they've done the first step of stopping and asking yourself, what do you want? But
Mhm.
then you have to dive into why do you want that? I have a
And the
coaching
why is
question.
almost more important.
It is because what is that going to do for you? My very last question in my discovery call is if all of this happens, you get everything, magic wand granted, you get everything. What does that feel like? What does that look like to your life? Right? And every single person, so we actually had this topic, was it last month? Every single person said peace, ease,
Mhm.
freedom. And I'm like, now okay, then let's go backwards. Like you're saying,
Mhm.
do these things
What
give
are
you
your
that?
values?
Because let's use a house as an example. Let's do this because especially right now, everybody can understand me in this where I'm looking around going, because we lost everything. We lost everything.
Mhm.
And we've been living for the last 13, 12 years in a 1,300 square foot house.
Mhm.
Very humble, very, right?
Yeah.
I call it our storage unit with beds. Now, outside of this, I see on social media and the world and my friends and everything, I see these houses that are like, oh my gosh, and being decorated by designers and I'm like, how do you people afford this? How are you doing this? Is this really, because to me, I see having to clean, having to stress, having to care that it looks a certain way. And now, no, don't get me wrong. If this is your dream and this is what you want, I love that for you. You have identified this. This is your thing. For me, someone who lives out of a backpack most of the year, I see it as chaos, clutter, something else I have to keep up with, yelling at my
Mhm.
kids to clean up their stuff, fighting with my husband, stressed about money, my husband being gone at work trying to pay for it. Like, I see shackles. That is the opposite of freedom. That is the opposite of ease. So, that is a perfect example of doing the working backwards
Yeah.
I think I
And I
want a house.
but I
Well,
think
what do I
the
want from it?
I think a good example though is I'm the opposite of you. So I think this is like a good example
Oh,
for
yay,
your like
perfect.
for me, I want ease and security. So like a house, I mean, my house wasn't huge, like, but we bought it at the right time. But we had a kid, right, 2 years ago. So my husband's constantly like, we should maybe look at a bigger house. We should do these things. And I'm like, we're not having another kid. So like, but what for me, what the house represents is the ease and the freedom because I always have a place to come back to, right? So, like, I see it as like, I mean, it is chaos and it is all these things that I have to extra think about. But for me, it's like the root of where I can then have the freedom out of, right? So for me, freedom aligns with like, okay, I have freedom, but then I have security. And the security is what offers the freedom. Right. So we're literally the opposite in that way. And so, but this is like such a great example of the working backwards, right? Like we're both like house, and then we get to two different entire answers about what it means. Right. And so when we ask this question to ourselves or with a professional or with a coach or with in our marriage, we get to say, like, okay, but do what that equals align. Like, are we actually working towards the same thing? Because you and I would be talking about two completely different things if we couldn't articulate what the why was.
And the husbands that you're trying to explain this to could be completely
Mhm.
opposite as well. Because the
Oh, yeah,
husband in
1000%.
this situation is like, I see this as, look what I've done. This is my
Mhm,
accomplishment. I love
mhm.
this. It is a place for us to be stable and have memories versus the wife who's looking at it as, I will tear my hair out if I have to clean this house every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Perfect example of communicating the why, not the want.
and having the language of your own values, right? Like, I hired a values and goals coach at the beginning of the year, and she made me do this exercise where
Mm.
I had to, because I was like, I don't know what my values are as a mother anymore. Like, I was like, game over. I don't know what's happening. And so she had me do this exercise, and she mails you these cards where you pick your values. She has you like pick, I think it's like 20, then you narrow it down to like 10, and then you narrow it down to 5. And I own my own business. I run 2 separate businesses. I have for the last 5 years. And um so one of the values on my list was freedom. And when my husband was doing it, he looked at me and was like, "Why didn't you pick entrepreneurship?" Because I would have assumed your value would be entrepreneurship because of the way that you've always wanted to work and run businesses, which isn't entirely true, but it's a minimize of that story. But I was like, "No, entrepreneurship is freedom to me." Right? Being able to run my own business offers me the freedom. So, like, even in that small conversation, our language was different about what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I had to
Which
then
was
figure out
deeper.
how to say, this is what it means to me.
Mhm.
Because I literally looked at him and I was like, if I don't want freedom anymore, then I probably would go back to having a 9 to 5 job and work for someone else and like have someone just like pay my salary and not have to think about it and run. Like, I wouldn't have to do all these things. Like, and maybe at some point that is freedom to me. But that's why entrepreneurship wasn't on the list.
That's a perfect example of basement. So one of the members in my community, she actually said it better because I adopted this thing under the thing under the thing of one of my really good friends, Seth Studley, and he's a counselor. And so their favorite thing is thing under the thing under the thing.
Mm-hmm.
What you're mad about
Nice.
or what you're happy about or whatever is not necessarily that thing that you think you're happy about. It's the thing under the thing
Mm-hmm.
under the thing that's coming and triggering it, right? So you have to get to that. And so this gal in my community calls it her basement. She's been digging because she's trying to
Love
find
that.
her basement. And I'm like, yes, yes, that's exactly right. Because for your husband, he's seeing it as because he doesn't have that internal that you have. So he is seeing it as the external, the entrepreneurship, but your basement, even further below that, is the freedom, is the
Mhm.
why connected to the freedom. That's cool. I
And
love
for, like,
that.
as, like, also, like, to just circle it all in, I also stated that, for me, security and foundation were a huge thing, right? So your
Mhm.
values can be not the same. Like, they don't all have to be the same, right? Like,
Right.
security and like, having a foundation and roots is not the same as freedom to most people, right? So when we pull these value lists, we also sometimes get performative about it, and we unpack the basement because we're like, "Oh, but, like, these things are directly in contradiction to each other." And you're like, "Yeah, actually they are, and that's okay. They can still live simultaneously together." because actually you
Have
need all of them to be
have you
well-rounded.
ever I don't know if this'll come in, but this is what this just made me think of. Have you done your Enneagram?
I am a 3.
I'm a 3 too,
That's
but
feels right.
listen to this. How's this for performative and a very Utah approach to this? I read what that meant and went, "Oh, I don't like that. No, that makes me
Oh, yeah,
sound
me too.
horrible. I'm not a 3."
Being an achiever, when you read the Enneagram and you find out you're an achiever, you're like, "Oh, oldest
Yeah,
daughter."
especially where you're a mom and you
Uh,
are a nurturer and you do have these people-pleasing tendencies, which I don't. I've completely abandoned and I love it for it. But being raised in Utah, I've naturally been given all of that baggage of people-pleasing. And so when I read that, I immediately said, "Oh, no, that's not me. I don't want that. Let's do it again." Like I'm picking a new card. Like, let me try again. Let me draw again. And
which I think I
that
like the Enneagram, but I actually don't use it in my I use human design way more instead because it gives such a more holistic picture of who someone
mhm.
is. It allows you to be
I
like,
need to do
"Oh,
that. I've had
okay.
so many people bring that to me, and I just have been too lazy to sit down and do it. But yes, I need to
Oh,
do that as
I'll do
well.
it
That
for you."
would be very interesting. All right. Let's get back to your forward healing approach and your after therapy, thriving and living in after therapy. I love this so much. Where did this even begin? What made you just go, doink? Were you like just sending clients off like you're healed? And you're like, wait a minute, they're not.
No, actually, it was the exact opposite. That's the problem. They weren't leaving.
Oh, like it's never ending.
Yeah, they would. I mean, honestly, like a big part of it is my own work and my own healing and me realizing like, hey, I've been in therapy since I was 10 years old. That's over 2 decades on and off of
Sure.
therapy. And every time I would go back into therapy, it would be the same thing over and over again. And not the same thing, but the same thing in a different way. And I was like, something needs to be different. And then and then when I became a therapist, I ended up with like a lot of clients who were in the same situation where they would walk in my office and they'd be like, I've been in and out of therapy for 10 years. Like, what are you going to offer me that's different? I've been doing this for 20 years. What are you going to do that's different? Like, I know why I'm here again. So like, let's just get to it. And I was like, what are we doing? And then in 2020, I ended up hiring my first coach. Um, because I was like, "What am I doing?" Right? It was really the question of like, "What am I doing?" Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am. I know I have all these things that have happened to me and I understand them and I can analyze them to depth, but like, how do I make a life now? And that was where all of my clients were getting stuck, where it's like, I know all these things about myself, but like, how do I actually build a life now? That I know these things, right? And for me, it was like an awakening to be like, oh, these things in America that we've like pinned against each other, coaching and counseling therapists and life coaches, da 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 da, should actually be working together. If we have them like not be so pitted against each other that we can't work together, then we're doing a disservice to clients who actually need both, right? Because coaching is very forward movement. It's not processing your past. If you are by chance ever working with a coach who like is a trauma coach like run kind of a thing, like that is a specific licensure that you should
Yeah.
have because
You should have
the
already done that. It's like I said at the beginning of the
yeah,
conversation. You should have already done that. By the time
yeah,
you get to me, if you're starting to do those things again, I'm saying, no, no, go back,
yeah.
go back. Mm.
Exactly. And where the gap is that we're not educating clients or consumers of this to know the difference. What they're being sold on is the potential outcome. And so for me, the outcome is therapy. And then we move into actual life coaching because we're not processing any of the stuff. We're figuring out how to
Forward.
integrate it into life. And they're two very different skill sets. Like I just found myself over and over in sessions being like, I'm not actually doing therapy. Like,
Right.
I mean, I was in a way, but I'm not because you don't have anything that like
How are
is
you
considered
implementing
clinical.
what you've done? You've now just dug all this up. So we
Yeah,
have
what are you
I've
doing?
done it for the past both years that we've been going for April and May. And I do this April showers bring May flowers kind of concept. So
Mm.
in April, it's always digging a little bit back into the dirt and getting the
Mhm.
old roots out and the weeds and getting that soil ready. But April is all about action. action, forward
Yes.
moving. And so that's everything you just said to me. It goes back to my word and what we're going to just like be hitting so hard is results. How
Mhm.
are you implementing this into your life? I had a gal in here that was 2 years ago told me she wants to travel. She wants
Mhm.
to make this a big goal for her family and they want to do more trips together and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great, whatever. So we go on and we're doing life. And I sit down again with her 6 months ago and I'm like, ask these same questions. And she says, travel. And I says, that was a year and a half ago you said that.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And instead of just listening, I was like, shit or get off the pot.
Mhm.
If you don't put a deadline on this, if you don't put some action, yes, we've done your passports. Yes, we've done these things. We've done these prep work, right? But if you don't put an actual, this is going to happen on something, it's never going to happen. It's a vibe. I call it a vibe
Mhm.
rather than an actuality. It's like
Mhm.
when people say they want a better marriage. What does
What are
that
you doing?
mean? What does it even mean? What does that even mean? Do you want to have more sex? That sounds horrible to some people. Do you want to go on trips together? Do you want to what does that mean? Do you want to fight with your husband less? Do you want to fight with your husband more? Because maybe the fight is where the fire is. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's different, but you have to decide. It's all of these people, I think, especially with how big podcasts are, you know, and it's all of this consuming, Instagram, social media, the Mel
We actually
Robbins and like
created
Breen Browns and it's like I'm consuming. Yes, what they're saying is yes, it's so important, it's so valuable, it resonates.
we're not doing anything with it.
Well, then what's the next step? So
'Cause that's
that's
why
all of my yeah,
we created a
that's
self-help
where
book
we get
club.
the work. Right. The
We
self-help
created
book
like a
club.
self-help book club because
Yeah.
what I was watching was all these clients, myself included, like I can consume self-help stuff all the time. But like, I mean, I have to for my job, so it's kind of different. But
Right.
I think like I was watching all these clients be like, oh, I read the Brene Brown book and I read the Mel Robbins book and I read um The Body Keeps the Score and I did all these things. And I was like, okay,
Right.
cool. Who are you talking to this about? Besides me. Because like
Right.
I'm great,
How are
but
you
like I'm the
processing
person.
everything you just took in?
Yeah, so we created this self-help book club because I was like, "Cool, we're gonna read a book together, and then we're gonna come together at the end of 8 weeks, and we're gonna actually talk about it, so you can figure out what the book actually meant to you, or the podcast actually meant to you." Because you can listen to things all the time, but if you're not actually like sharing it or processing it, you're not doing anything, and then you feel shame because you didn't
Yeah.
do anything.
Right. Or it feels too
And
daunting. It feels too overwhelming. Like, oh, I could
mhm,
never do that. Or that's
yeah,
too big. And it's like, well, wait a minute. No, let's break it down even further then. Okay. If you're saying you want to travel, first of all, break it down to
what does it
do you
mean?
want to travel
What's traveling?
internationally? Do you want to travel to the next state? Does this going to require a flight? Do you have your husband's full support? How much money is that going to need? It's like break it down to the point where
Mhm.
this goal that's the size of, we'll just say an elephant, because that's the saying, right? And break it down to the point where today, what can you do today to work towards that? And it's that
Mhm.
one step of saying international travel. Okay, easy, done. Guess
Right.
what? Now we have a path. Now we have a road that we can start on.
And that's where for me, I feel like we're as a society really ready to shift mental health, right? And more into this mental well-being state, which is before there was like a path, but the path has been to reduce symptoms, not to build life. And we're in a society now where so much of what we quote unquote thought life was going to look like, buying a house, having the kids, having the career that never changes, like all these things, especially as millennial women, we were taught we don't have, and they're not even
Or we're not
accessible.
happy with.
Oh yeah,
We
well, that
want
too.
something different.
Exactly. And so what we haven't done yet is said, what if the symptoms are because you're living a life that you actually just were working towards you don't like? And then what does that life need to look like, right? Like what is the integrity that you're trying to build within yourself? Because that's actually like the thing that's missing. But we need to understand all the roots before we can take the action. And
Right.
therapists aren't trained to take the action. Let's be clear. Like We're really good at the processing. I'm really good. Even as a coach, I find
Yeah,
myself being like trapped in the
how do you
process.
feel about that?
I have to like really work on the action part because it's not in my clinical training. But, like, so many people will just continue in therapy, and I'm like, "What are we doing here?" Like, so many sessions, I'm like, what are we doing?" Like, you need someone that's gonna be like, "This is the steps to get to X. You broke down the steps, and are you doing we don't need to figure out how to manage your anxiety anymore. You got it. You're good. Like,
You
those
got it.
meds
You
work.
know that it's
You
a
got the
thing.
tools.
You've
You know how to find
identified.
me. We're good."
You've identified the problem. Okay, so good. Oh my gosh. Well, looking ahead, where do you see forward healing therapy?
Me, I'm real bad at future planning. It's like, so to be fair,
Just
all of forward
contradict
healing.
everything we just said.
Yeah, let's contradict everything I've just said, and also, to be fair, if you ever choose to work with me and you're listening to this or you do it, I am, like, a constant pivoter. Um, it's just in my nature, but I think for me, the biggest thing I'm seeing right now is, like, how do we build more community into what we're doing? How do we educate people about what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it? And how do we advocate? Like, a lot of it is gonna be community building and education and advocating for our clients to really start to check in with themselves to say, like, "Why do I keep going to therapy? Is it because I have to, or is it because I don't know where else to land?" And then how
What's
do we
the
build a network
outcome?
of
What do I
people?
want?
Yeah, and how do we then build a network of coaches and people who we can send clients to who aren't gonna try to re-therapize them or don't agree with mental health, right? Like, because then we have to work through that issue. So a lot of forward healing right now is very much focused on, like, how do we build something that helps people see their mental health differently?
Oh, that you just cracked open a whole new episode because one of the biggest
Great, we
problems
won't be
I
able to do it
think,
for 8 months,
yeah,
so
yeah, we're not gonna, I know, right? Let's see how many times we can cancel this next one. It's I wanna dive into, but obviously we cannot, we don't have the time. My husband just came in even. I'm like, he's gonna join us on the podcast. No, it's I wanna dive into, and he's actually finding this out as well. We're both finding this out as well because we have taken on this passion project of wanting to help other people. We feel like we
Mhm,
have succeeded in this specific thing. We went
mhm,
from nothing, we had everything, lost it all,
mhm,
and came out of it saying, what do we want? How do we want to do it? Why do we want to do it? We've lived this life, right? I am not the
mhm.
normal. We are not the normal Utah couple. We, have traveled the world with our kids. They have not been homeschooled. They have not gone to school. They have gone to school. We don't have a fancy, we've got all of these things that are the non traditional, right? And so now we feel like we can help other people do this. However, here's the question. Long story long, here's the question. How do you get people to see their problems in their own thinking, right? Their
Mm.
blocks? Because I can see it. I feel like this is a human design thing, but I feel like I have a magic mirror where I can pull things out of people that they're not seeing at all. And I'm like, boom, it's right there. I see it. But I need to help you see it. And it's hard to do because people are not willing to see these things, right? Because they're labeled. It's like a label, like it's bad, or it's like, no, you're just blocked. You just need help getting past this block.
I think sometimes, but I'm just recalling when I was in graduate school, they asked this question about what do you believe about how people change? And everybody was like, I believe that people change when they're ready, or I believe that people are naturally good and they will change. And I have this really firm belief that people won't change until they hit rock bottom. Like
Yeah, the
they
hurt
have,
has to be worse than the
yes,
scary on the other side of the
correct.
unknown.
And so I don't know that it's actually sometimes a block. I think it's all timing and it's people planting the seeds to say, I'm noticing that you do this. Have you ever thought about it? Or like the example I gave earlier, right? Which was like, why are you part of the church? What does it mean to you? And like you're asking and planting the seed that then either stick or they fall off. And for some people it has to be super blunt. Like, what are you doing? And why are you doing it? And other times it's like, did you notice we've done that over and over again for a while? what do you think the block is? Right. And like really it's all timing. Like a lot of it truly is like, does this hurt less than the fear or does this hurt more than the potential fear? And how much energy and time do I have in shifting this pattern in my life? Like I have a huge thing right now where I would love to like grow forward healing bigger and do all these things, but I have a toddler and nothing gets my capacity because every 10 days he's sick from daycare. And I can't work. I work in a 6-hour chunk every day. And when I'm not working, I'm chasing something to keep alive. Like I do not have the capacity to change all these things in my life right now. I have the bare minimum capacity to keep my kid alive, to make my business function, and to like attempt to have a healthy marriage, right? Like
And shower sometime
timing
in
and
between.
timing and energy are like such valuable commodities that sometimes like when a client walks in, I'll be like, it doesn't sound like you actually have the capacity or time for this. Why are you here? And that's
Boom.
okay. It's okay for you to not have that and come back in 6 months when you do.
That's what I
So
tell
start next
everyone
month.
when they're like, I don't have the time for that. Okay, I will not. I will not. I don't have the time or I don't have the money. I will not. Because
You have to make it.
what are you prioritizing? You may not have the time for this. You may not because you're not prioritizing, and that's fine, but say it that way. I'm not prioritizing this. I'm not prioritizing my physical health. I'm not
Mhm.
prioritizing my mental health. I'm not prioritizing budgeting. Okay? Let's say it that way. Let's take ownership. I'm not time managing myself to the point where I can create more time. Let's talk about it like that. I love that you just jumped into your season and it's admitting, like me,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example, last year before we left again to leave the country, my business was like this. My trajectory was like this. I had a business coach. I was like, got to get all
Mhm.
these guests on the podcast, got to build my company, got to da la 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 la. And then my husband's like, yeah, let's leave the country again for the next year or so. And I'm like, huh. And honestly,
Okay.
I had this like whole ease became my word halfway through the year
Mm.
because it was not before that. But I had been given all of these signs along the way through the first of the year where I was forcing, pulling,
Mhm.
forcing, struggling, like, this feeling of not natural, normal force, right? Versus as soon as he said that to me, I was like, ease. Just, it doesn't matter if I don't put out a podcast every day. It doesn't matter if the Wi Fi in Italy is bad. It doesn't matter. And as soon as I just like, it felt this like shift. And that's where I am right now, actually, in this, I call it mindful hibernation.
True.
I'm,
True.
this is my last baby. I'm only doing this one last time. So have I stopped completely going to the gym all year? Yeah, I have. I've put myself, my health, my family, absolutely at the front of everything I do and think and feel and say and but it's a mindful choice, just like you just said. You are mindful about the fact that you don't have right now in this season, and that's okay. We do
Mhm.
not have to do everything right now.
Nope.
If these women can think back to high school, junior high, do you remember being like, oh my gosh, high school is the most important thing in the world. These are going to be my forever friends. These are going to be my friends I'm going to be with forever and ever and ever. And like, I look back on that and it was a blip, right? I'm
Mhm.
trying to explain this to our 13-year-old. I'm like, it is a blip. Your life, this book of your life, this is one little chapter of
Right.
this whole story you're creating. You don't have to make all of these decisions right now and end up here at the end of the book. You
Which we
have
need to
all
remember
of
at
these
30.
beautiful chapters that get to look different. You get to have this romance, you get to have this adversary, you get to have this struggle, you get to have this success. You get to it's a whole thing. It doesn't have to happen, right? But what does have to happen right now? Asking yourself, what do you want to
Mhm.
have happen at some point
Right.
right now?
Just kidding.
How can I shift my thinking? What hurts? What feels good? That's usually the best question to start with. What hurts? What feels good? Do less of that. Do more of that.
I actually lead a whole workshop on this, and I'll bring it back in
Ooh,
2025.
yeah. When you
Reset
do,
workshop.
I love that. Let's get back on this, and we'll have you back on, and we'll do a post about it and a post about it. We'll do an episode about it, and you can sell your course, whatever you're doing. Hey, lady, where can these beautiful, wonderful listeners of mine come and find you?
Social media. I mean, honestly, we're only on Instagram because I'm somewhat of an old millennial, and social media stresses me out. Forwardhealing.co is our Instagram handle. It's also our website. And that's like the best place to hang with us. I will be launching a new newsletter, which is one of my passions, starting in 2025, where once a month you'll get a mini podcast episode from me,
Yay.
about tips, tools, and life after therapy. And
I love it.
so that would be the place to hang and then figure out if you want to work with us.
That's amazing. I love it. I'm gonna get signed up.
Yeah.
Make sure you keep me posted on all things so I can keep sharing as well. And thank you so much. I'm so glad we finally made this happen.
Me too. We did it. We did it.
Did it. All right, lady. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.